May it please the court. Your Honor, a search for the truth is by no means unconstitutional. We are here today after the burning down of a Phillips High School maintenance building due to arson. As a result of this already unfortunate event, Sheldon Brown, a maintenance worker inside of the building at the time of the fire, was killed. The next day, Detectives Sam O'Leary and Alex Jones were dispatched to investigate the incident, going to the homes of Quinn Patel and Dakota Allen to try and learn more from each suspect and discover the truth behind the arson. After gaining consent from Miss Allen's father, Detective Sam O'Leary picked the defendant up from her house and drove her around, even taking her to lunch. And as time passed by during the interview, the defendant finally admitted to committing the crime. Yet, despite admitting to this act in a setting which is not custodial interrogation, the defendant now wishes to claim that this admission was elicited involuntarily. Your Honor, in accordance with the 2011 case of JDB versus North Carolina, we will prove that the defendant's Fifth Amendment rights were not breached, as no custodial interrogation took place. Likewise, there is no violation of the defendant's 14th Amendment rights, as she admitted all confessions voluntarily. And even though the defendant declares that the detectives intentionally deprived her of her medication, we will prove that this statement simply is irrelevant, let alone false. If the defendant had taken her medication that morning, it would be of no difference to whether or not her confession was voluntary. The defendant will be unable to prove anything that shows that ADHD or any condition she may be suffering from has any bearing on the voluntariness of a confession. We will call two witnesses to the stand today, Your Honor. First, we will call Detective Sam O'Leary, who works at the Phillips Police Department. He will tell how the defendant's father consented to his daughter being interviewed and how no signs of medication were ever administered, let alone mentioned at any point in time. He'll also walk us through the interview process, sharing with us the informal conditions and casual atmosphere of the interview, and how there's no evidence whatsoever of any physical contact occurring between the defendant and the detective. He will also describe the methods, sometimes stern, but never improper, in which he used to try to get the defendant to share any and all pertinent information, and he will also note how the defendant would react with guilt-ridden responses. Finally, he will explain the defendant's ultimate confession of committing the crime. Next, we will call Dr. Casey Highlander to the stand, a psychologist and Phillips High School counselor. He will share some of his past interactions with the defendant, noting her intelligence, yet many behavioral issues inside and out of the classroom. He will then share his experiences with the effects and uses of the drug Ativan, as well as ADHD, the disorder Ativan is primarily used to treat. He will elaborate on how the defendant seldom suffers from the side effects or withdrawal symptoms of the drug, but specifically, he will mention how the defendant often tries to avoid disciplinary action by blaming her mistakes on an alleged lack of medication. And finally, he will declare how, based off of his experiences with the drug and with the defendant, that the defendant is not dependent upon Ativan. At the end of this case, we will argue that the defendant's motion to suppress should be denied because the defendant's 5th and 14th Amendment rights were never breached. The interview that occurred does not fit the description of a custodial interrogation. The defendant's confession was by no means coerced. The defendant's admission was completely voluntary. She was aware of the situation at hand and was in a reasonable state when she confessed to the crime. All Detective O'Leary did was to try to find the truth behind an arson that killed an innocent man. And Your Honor, a search for the truth is by no means unconstitutional. Thank you.
Defense opening?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
My name is Rebecca Pappenhagen. I'd like to introduce my co-counsel, Ms. Brianna Rosewater.
Good afternoon, Your Honors.
Good afternoon.
This afternoon, we'll be calling two witnesses, Miss Dakota Allen, played by Miss Jade Jennings,
Good day, Your Honor.
and Dr. Chris Martinez, played by Jedediah Suntime.
Good morning.
Now, Your Honor, we're here today because Miss Dakota Allen, a fairly average 15-year-old girl, has been accused of arson and murder. Now, I say fairly normal because Miss Allen lost her mother to a similar arson. Now, Miss Allen, during this violent interrogation, gave an involuntary and coerced statement, which she wishes to suppress. Now, today you'll hear testimony of Ms. Allen on her own behalf. She will tell you how she was verbally and physically accosted by Detective O'Leary. She will tell you how she felt too terrified to call a lawyer or her father to ask for basic medication. A medication which Dr. Martinez will tell you about. A medication that has several severe side effects that amplify normal behaviors that young adults have. Now, he'll tell you that suspicious behaviors such as fidgeting or lack of eye contact are common coping skills for teenagers in high-stress situations. Now, in the end, Your Honor, my co-counsel will come up before you. She'll argue cases such as the Miranda case, which give us our Miranda warnings, which Miss Allen was not given. She will tell you that this was a custodial interrogation because if Thompson and Keone, a reasonable person would felt like they could leave. However, Miss Allen will tell you today that she did not feel like she could leave. She felt trapped, frightened, and because of a lack of medication, she felt as if she could do nothing. We anticipate that the prosecution will try and paint you a picture of a gang member or a terrifying child who has spent many times with detectives, who has quite a lot of experience in courtrooms like this. But the truth, Your Honors, and ladies and gentlemen of the court, is that Miss Allen is a 15-year-old girl with minimal social skills and severe emotional scarring from the death of her mother. And in the end, Your Honors, Miss Allen, a terrified 15-year-old girl, lost to the system because she became victim to fear and panic and was unable to help herself. Now, in the end, Your Honors, my co-counsel and I will ask you to suppress an involuntary statement of a terrified 15-year-old girl. Thank you, Your Honors.